Okay, I'm just waiting for confirmation. Yeah, we're now live. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor Mohammed Iqbal from Leeds. I'm chairing today's West Yorkshire Police and Crime Panel meeting. And in case of technology failure, the Deputy Councillor Jackie Williams from Wakefield will take over and continue with the meeting. It is a virtual meeting. I've explained the rules already in the private session. It's very difficult to manage a virtual meeting. You know, when you're sat in a live meeting, you can get a nudge and wave or something. But so please give me a nudge if you can electronically, if I miss anything. As you will know, after our last meeting, if you don't know, which was in October, that evening I caught the virus, I got the symptoms, and I had a bad week of aches and pains, 2 weeks of aches and pains, and I'm glad to be back here after 4 weeks. It's dreadful when you think of coronavirus, after hearing the news of so many people passing away that you know. So my heartfelt sympathies to anyone who's lost friends or relatives. It's not easy, but they say there's a light at the end of the tunnel with this vaccine. We'll have to see. This may not be the last virtual meeting, but I hope we can overcome these hurdles. So can I, to formally start, can I now introduce the Officer for Police and Crime Panel, Samantha Wilkinson, who will introduce her team, and then she'll introduce all the councillors, and then we'll introduce Commissioner's team. So, Samantha.
Good morning. Yes, it's Samantha Wilkinson, Police and Crime Panel Officer. We've got James Lightfoot from Comms, who is doing the live stream, and Sharon Fraser from Legal supporting the panel. We've got Councillor Sophie Whitaker from Calderdale. We've got Councillor Russell Brown of Bradford, Councillor Amanda Carter of Leeds. We've got Roger Grasby, independent panel member, Councillor Tariq Hussain of Bradford. We've got Mohammed, sorry, no, we haven't. We've got Joe Sykes, independent panel member. We've got Jackie Williams of Wakefield. We've got Councillor Cahill Burke of Kirklees. We've got Councillor Peter Green of Leeds and Councillor Masood Ahmed of Kirklees.
Thank you, Sam. Can we now introduce? Can I introduce Commissioner for West Yorkshire, Mark Burns-Williamson? Mark, if you introduce your team as well, please.
Yeah. Good morning, Mohammed and everybody. I'm pleased to hear that you're on the road to recovery, Chair, following your illness. So that's good to hear. Mark Burns-Williamson, Police and Crime Commissioner for West Yorkshire. I think we've got Catherine Johnson on the call as well, who's the Treasurer from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. And I think John Robbins, the Chief Constable, is joining us as well this morning. Have I missed anybody else out? I'm not sure if Wendy Stevens, yeah. Our research manager as well is on the call.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can we have the acceptance of apologies? I think we've got Councillor Dunbar from Wakefield, Stuart Heptonstall from Stuart Heptonstall, and Mohammed Naeem Calderdale, who's not feeling well. The apologies, Sam. And, we've got a substitute for Richard. I understand. I think Shakila Lally is with us as well. So welcome, Shakila.
Yes, Shakila's having technical problems, so she is watching the live link and will send me any questions through.
Okay, she's alien spirit.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, item 2, can we approve the correct record of meeting from last panel meeting? And Then we will go to the matters arising. Can we say the true accounts of the minutes? I gather silence means acceptance.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you. And in the matters arising, you will have received the correction report from Sam in the private brief panel, matters arising on correction item 7.6, where the Chief Constable spoke about the PCSOs. I mean, it's a long report there, and I'm sure you've all read, so that's the correction in the minutes. Are we all in favour of that? Agreed on as well?
Yes.
Okay. Is Chief Constable with us in case he wants to comment on that, or we're okay on that if we don't hear anything?
No, we're okay with that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Can I just interrupt quickly? It's Gregory Jones, Digital Comms Manager. Can I just ask that everyone turns their videos off for the live stream? When we have video on it, it interrupts the live stream and it breaks it. So we need to have it just so it's imagery, if that's all right.
So turn all videos off?
Turn all videos off, thank you.
Okay, including me. Okay.
Yes, please. We are working on improving it so we can have videos on, but it's going to take a bit of time before we get to that stage.
Oh, okay, thanks. So item 3, to note any items which are agreed to the agenda, any urgent items of urgency. Item 3. Silence means no item.
There are no urgent items.
No urgent items. Item 4, members declaration of interest. Anybody to declare any interest? No. That takes us on to item 5, police and crime plan refresh. The report is attached, and then can I hand over to the Commissioner to give us a brief?
I don't know how to do it.
Yes, thanks, Chair.
Report on this year.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just check?
That's
Do you want me to stay off the video link? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the advice from my IT.
Can I just check then? Can everybody hear okay?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Yes, Mark, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can.
Very clear.
Good, thank you. So this is the refreshed police and crime plan that we've discussed other iterations at previous meetings, and we do look at the plan every year in terms of an annual refresh, and you'll see, just glancing through the plan, we've kept the plan at a glance page, which I hope is helpful, and certainly we've had good feedback on that from partners and members of the public who just want literally a glance, so that sort of gives the overview. I think just in terms of changes to this plan, and it still is draft, albeit hopefully we'll look to finalise it pretty quickly after this meeting. We've done a revision around the radicalisation priority to the terminology of countering terrorism, because that certainly better reflects the changing landscape around terrorism offences, and of course it's much more across the spectrum these days. I myself and the Chief Constable actually continue to sit on a national counter-terrorism oversight group, so we do get regular updates at the national level as well as to our own counter-terrorism unit. And of course many of you will be aware that the threat level in the UK was escalated last week to severe, particularly in relation to events in France. So we think that is a better encapsulation of that priority. We've also expanded the child sexual abuse priority to include child sexual exploitation, and again that just reflects some of the evolving interconnections with those types of crimes, and we feel that sits better. Citing serious violence as a standalone priority for the first time, and to be fair to government, they've made that a priority And as you know, we've had some funding to set up the violence reduction unit in West Yorkshire, which is in place. Again, a review on that being undertaken as we speak, and I think government will be making some announcements again shortly around the role of ROCUs, which are regional organised crime units, and potentially more officers going into those as part of the national police uplift programme. But again, we'll be watching that one carefully, because West Yorkshire is a host regional organised crime unit, and when posts do come up or extra posts are created in those structures, they do tend to draw from West Yorkshire and the other host ROCUs around the country. And that
Commissioner, if you could hold on a second, if you don't mind. I think the live stream has stopped. Greg, is it working, or are we still off? Sorry about that, Commissioner, because I got a message from Kelly that it's not working. Hello, Greg? IT?
I can hear you, Mohammed. I don't know if anybody else can.
I can hear you, but I'm not sure Greg's still in the meeting.
No, he's there. He's working on it. Sorry, but you can't.
Shall we hold the meeting or continue?
If we can hold, sorry that there is a problem with it.
Okay.
Okay, no worries.
Apologies.
Hello, can I just check if everything is all right?
Are you asking us in general, Greg, or?
Yeah, just because I'm watching the stream and everyone was just muted.
Right, well,
We
we've
told
had a
them-
message that the stream wasn't working.
It seems to be absolutely fine from my end. I've been watching it. I'll let you know if there's anything that goes wrong
Also,
with the
if
stream.
you hear silence for a bit long, unusual silence, Roger, no, Gregory, then come in. Okay, sorry, Commissioner, we thought the stream stopped, but it's working now. So if you could continue, Commissioner.
Okay.
I'll message you, Sam, if anything does happen. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay, Cham. Okay to continue.
Yeah,
Right.
sure.
Thank you. So I was just about towards the back end of my comments, I think, Chair. So, I mean, the overall vision of the plan remains the same, which is keeping West Yorkshire safe and feeling safe. And as I've mentioned, the plan at a glance is really useful, because it just talks about the four main outcomes, which are tackling crime and antisocial behaviour, safeguarding vulnerable people, working to improve criminal justice, although that one is still a bit of a work in progress, given the real issues with the courts and the backlogs that we're just really trying to get a better picture of what is achievable, given all the impact of COVID and the social distancing measures that are in place at the courts, and then importantly supporting victims and witnesses. So, you know, the plan sets out in detail each of those priorities set out under those 4 outcomes, and then just gives some commentary towards the back of the plan regarding how we deliver, and listening to people is really important, obviously, around engagement, trying to understand our communities throughout West Yorkshire and the diversity and the challenges that they face. Working together, partnership, extremely important as we move forward, and other areas around the resources, of course, and we just set out there the overall expenditure and reference to the Safer Communities Fund, which is now, I'm pleased to say, given out nearly £3.5 million to more than 700 groups over the last few years through the proceeds of crime, which makes a big difference to many groups. And then we say a bit about the commissioning of our services, evaluating the plan and the delivery framework at the end of the plan. So I hope that that is helpful, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. That is helpful. And can I open up for questions from the panel on your plan refresh? As we've got indication from Roger to start off on this issue. Roger, do you have a comment on item 5? Anybody else wants to comment while we wait for Roger? Is Roger on? Just checking. Yeah, Roger's on. Your mic's on, Roger, as well.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Roger, we can hear you.
Sorry, I went off. You couldn't hear me. I have to call my wife when.
Okay, it's okay. Did you want to comment on item 5?
Yes, I got a couple of things, if I could. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Morning, Mark.
Morning.
I think, like members of the panel, we find it slightly odd still that over 4.5 years into a 5-year plan, you choose to refresh it, notwithstanding that there are, different priorities. But be that as it may, I had three questions. Firstly, if you recall at the last meeting, on behalf of the panel, I raised 3 suggestions for you to include something about holding the Chief Constable to account. And there are references about BAME officers and their percentage within operational policing in order to demonstrate the representation, appropriate representation in the community, and about outcomes, which we'll come on to when we perhaps deal with item 6 on the agenda. So I just wonder whether what your response was, whether you can point to any changes you've made in the text to cover those items. I'd like to ask about numbers and resources. You often do, and I understand why, talk about austerity in various forms and the impact it's had on West Yorkshire Police, but I'm sure you are aware about the magnanimity of the panel since 2018 in voting a above inflation precept, which has led to a net increase in police officers in 2018, 2019 and 2020, irrespective of the National Police uplift. So I suppose it's also to see what impact these officers, some of whom are now fully trained and available in neighbourhood teams, etc., are making on the delivery of the plan, because I think the residents and taxpayers of West Yorkshire can rightly expect to see some value for their investment. And I'd like you to talk about outcomes, because it's a fact and that during the currency of this plan, i.e. 2016 to 2021, positive prosecutions in West Yorkshire have halved. Now, you know, so that's the reality. So I think that needs to be reflected, and it isn't really reflected in the plan at all, or in any of your commentaries. There's been a singular reluctance, and I have raised this, as you well know, at meetings for the last several years, actually reporting in any public documents about what I call the outcomes, the things that really matter to the residents of West Yorkshire. Again, there's references to improved outcomes, but there's no evidence included in the report. So there's 3 points that you might like to comment on, Mark.
Yeah, no, thank you for those comments, Roger. So in terms of the first one, well, there's 4 actually. So just in reference to your why is it a refresh 4 years in? It's really because there's a mayor election next year, and clearly that isn't happening elsewhere in terms of a transition into a new structure, mayoral combined authority. So given that there will be an elected mayor who will take on the PCC powers within their office next year, I just felt it was pragmatic to refresh the plan at this stage. But having said that, looking at the plan, reading through it, I think it is pretty pertinent anyway to the current challenges, so I'm quite comfortable with that. In terms of changes to the text, yes, we have made some changes, Roger. Can I point to them all out now? I probably can't, but perhaps I might ask Wendy just to quickly comment, because clearly some of the detail, but I did speak to Wendy after the meeting, the last panel meeting, but changes have been made. Wendy, am I right in saying that?
Yes, you're right. We have looked at all of the different priorities to see what has changed, because in the unprecedented circumstances we're in, it has had an effect on all of these things. But the main changes you highlighted earlier, and as we discussed at the last panel meeting, the outcomes for the different crime types, etc. We've changed some of the metrics there just to reflect where we are. So there is changes in the text, but the biggest changes, I think, are more with regard to the metrics, and I think you will talk about criminal justice as well.
Yeah, thank you. So I have tried to weave in, Roger, let's say the holding to account, the various accountability meetings I had with the Chief Constable, and that is reflected in particularly on the evaluating the delivery of the police and crime plan, page 25, I think it is. And as Wendy's just said, moving that then into the delivery framework around that as well. I take the point on resources. Yes, we have obviously seen some police officer increases in recent years, and absolutely recognise that as the government would try and have us all believe that it's all down to central funding, it clearly isn't in terms of the precept increases that have been raised. You know, and as you know, I don't take that lightly in putting those proposals forward, because clearly that impacts on local taxpayers. But having said that, even though we have seen some modest increases in officer numbers, there's real pressures on police staff roles, and we're having to seriously look at how we manage those through vacancies and the pressures on current budgets, and in some cases having to utilise officers into jobs or roles that are not you know, as visible or on the front line as we might want them to be. So I think that is a factor, and some of the pressures around the PCSO funding as well, which you know we'll come on to later as well. But even though we've raised that precept, we're still, I think, the third lowest precept in the country for policing. which is limited to what we can actually deliver on the ground unless we get a better central funding settlement, which accounts for 70% of our budget. So I think the point of making the commentary there around resources is, we've just got to recognise where we've come from in terms of the austerity before we've had some better funding settlements in recent times. And as we know, it does take time then to fully recruit, deploy, and get people, onto the front line delivering policing services. So I think that's just the context I was setting. And then in terms of the impact that you mentioned, well, I think they are starting to have an impact, because over the last 12 months in particular, we have seen good performance around reductions in various crime categories, and that's been reported, and we've got a delivery quarterly next week where we'll look at that again. Obviously, we'll have to take into account the whole COVID impact to separate out the impact of that as opposed to some of the sort of other policing and community safety interventions. But on the criminal justice outcomes, yes, there's no doubt that it isn't, and it isn't, an excuse, but this is a real national issue regarding the drop in positive outcomes. And we'll get onto this in the next paper around investigations of criminal justice outcomes at court. So it's a concern for me, for the force. So I know Chief Constable referenced it in a meeting earlier this week, and the sort of criminal justice system itself, whether that's the CPS, the courts, and the capacity within the system, contributes significantly to all that, and they're not things directly, or they're not directly accountable to me with regards their services, but absolutely do recognise that, and we are trying to turn that around some of the investigative improvements. But of course, you need the whole system to be effective and efficient to get better outcomes. But it is something I'm very aware of.
Thank you, Commissioner. Roger, are we okay with that? With the response?
Oh yes, I think I've had my share. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Does anybody else want to comment on this item? Okay, so I take it this means we'll move on to next item, which is item 6, investigations and outcomes. Do you want to give an overview on this also?
Yeah, I've had a message to say that some of my colleagues are having difficulty with the live link. Do you want to just check if that is still in place?
Greg, are you there?
Just been checking myself, and it still all seems to be up and running.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to double check. Thank you. Right. So yes. So I'll move on to the next item then, which is the investigations and outcomes. So the background to this, and I know that yourselves at the panel have been requesting an update for a while, so obviously I'm pleased we've been able to do that, and there's a fair bit of detail in there, but the context is relating back to the HMIC, the independent inspectors of the police and fire and rescue services, with regards to an inspection they made, which looked at areas of improvement for West Yorkshire with regards to investigations. So the paper sets out the framework, the context and comparisons throughout England and Wales, and there's a breakdown of the different crime types. And the next part of the paper talks about the findings of the HMIC and what the progress has been, and the out of court disposals and the victim's journey as well towards the back end. So there's a section there that just gives a background around the what some of the outcomes and detection rates were looked at that time, and again trying to look at the victim journey and some of the appropriateness of the behaviours around the investigations and the recording of certain aspects within that. So there's a fair bit of detail on page 2, and then it lists the sort of outcomes at item 3, which I'm not going to list them all, but it's there for your information. In terms of the table that is on page 4, that sets out the West Yorkshire position in 2019 into 2020, during the 12-month period where 304,000 crimes or thereabouts were recorded, and some of the outcome ratios within those various categories. I mean, it's a very operational policey type report because it goes in to that detail, and I'll bring the Chief Constable in when I've made some further comments. But there's been a real focus, for obvious reasons, on what we call high harm offences, such as serious sexual offences and rape and serious violent crimes, and we've really tried to focus that locally within the force accountability arrangements that I touched on in the previous item. And certainly more recently, I'm pleased to say, even though the outcomes are still low, we are seeing some positive increases around outcome rates around rape, robbery, most serious violence, and residential burglary as well, albeit relatively modest increases. They're certainly heading in the right way. And at 4.8, you may have read there about the really significant judgment at the High Court, or Court of Appeal, sorry, regarding the disclosure of information from mobile phones and devices, which has led to the National Police Chiefs Council making some changes around how those digital investigation processes are implemented, which is, you know, really important given the digital aspect of many of these crimes now, where that is often part of the key part of investigation. But it's really trying to improve the position for victims and witnesses regarding how that is done, to try and at least encourage people to come forward and have things fully explained to them around what is required in those types of cases. I've touched on previous meetings, Chair, around the opening of the Sexual Assault Referral Centre in June of this year, and certainly I'm really hoping that again is a step change to the type of facilities and services available to high harm victims, and I'm sure it will be, because you know, it's a tremendous facility, and hopefully at some point you and your colleagues might get a chance to visit there. But I would highly recommend it in terms of once it's bedded in more, and the hopefully with the other side of a pandemic, where we can meet in a more normal way. There's a section then that touches on investigations review, and then the review progress, and it details a number of force structures that are in place to oversee that, to try and ensure we've got a corporate and consistent approach to embedding investigation practices, and then it highlights the areas that the HMIC highlighted around improvement. I'm not going to list those now, but further on it talks about progress to date, and there's again a lot of information in there around the results of some additional training that's been rolled out, which is important because this needs to be a constant awareness raising and skills development for police officers and investigators. And we've also now got a victims journey delivery group. Again, because certainly from my office, we're always pushing that the victim needs to be at the centre of this. There's a section on out of court disposals where we, through my office, we host an out of court scrutiny panel that meets quarterly, involving a number of partners, and that's been expanded more recently, albeit I think the impact of COVID has meant that there hasn't been a meeting of that for a while, but I need to look more into that as to what can be done in a virtual format if possible. But I think when you look at some of the figures and the cases that they looked at there, it was a concern that we had quite a number of those that were considered inappropriate or inconsistent. So on the one hand, it's really important we've got that scrutiny process in place. On the other hand, that is far too high in terms of the cases that were sampled, and that's why it's really important to learn and feed in from those dip sampling and scrutiny mechanisms to make sure we continue improvements. And then at the end it says a bit more around the victim's journey, and the outcomes, and making sure that the districts are really tuned into that. But perhaps, John, I mean, I've gone on a little bit there, but did you want to just add to that in terms of the operational side?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, everyone. Just for information and for the record, I've got Russ Foster with me as the Deputy Chief Constable, and also Mr. Andrew Wright, who's our very experienced Force Performance Manager. Sometimes we can get lost in the statistics and the percentages of these things. I suppose, despite the challenges we've seen nationally and locally, I think the elements that need to be brought out of the report is that you've seen previously, crime is going down, and in some of those high harm areas in West Yorkshire is going down, and outcomes are now showing a trajectory of going up. So we've talked previously at the panel around call handling and attendance, and I think we've got the organisation into a really good place around that. We've talked a lot about crime, data integrity and compliance, and our views and our position on that. We've talked, and we're now showing the reductions over the last year around crime, irrespective of COVID reductions, the reductions before and after COVID. And now, under some work that the Deputy's been running for the last 6 or 8 months, we're starting to see some significant increases around outcomes. However, when presented in percentage terms and in the national context, I accept it's a difficult and challenging environment, and the comments that have been made previously, and I'm sure will be made in the future, are all very valid. I suppose as a resident of West Yorkshire, as well as the Chief Constable, you'd kind of ask yourself the question as how's the local police force doing compared to similar forces, and how's it doing compared to most similar forces up and down the country in that sense. So on top of the statistics that you've got in front of you, I can now report up to the last 6 months, the outcome rate is at 11.8%, so it's continuing to go in a stronger way. In terms of rape offences, I'm sure we'll come back to, we're now up to 7.4%, and we're higher than both the national average and similar forces. In terms of most serious violence offences, we're at the national average and higher than the most similar group. And in terms of robbery, we're higher than the national average and higher than the most similar group. And the same goes for residential burglary as well. So I'll leave it there, and rather than bombard you with new statistics, I just want to make the point that the trajectory that's shown in the report before you is continuing to get stronger and stronger as we go forward. However, there's always much more to be done, because we understand the public perception of outcomes, detections, sanctions, identified suspects. It gets very complicated. So I'll leave it there, but just to reaffirm, we're definitely going in the right direction on outcomes now.
Thank you, Chief Constable. Can I welcome this report on behalf of the panel and appreciate all the hard work done by your team and officers, and also we look forward to visiting the Sexual Assaults Referral Centre. That's a very positive move. Well, all these scrutiny measures, and especially serious sexual assault issues, cases where the outcomes or the complainants withdrew halfway through the cases, and this centre will give them reassurances and confidence to come forward. We'll get all the support possible. So we welcome that and look forward to visiting that in future when the circumstances allow. Can I now welcome some comments and questions from panel members? We've got Roger again on first, and then colleagues can come in as well. Roger, did you want to ask something? Yeah.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, Roger.
Lovely, thanks. Yes, thank you very much, Mark. Well, I am one who wants to get bogged down in statistics, because that's what this report in many ways conveys. And I also am not entirely in agreement with the Chief Constable about the public perception, for the simple reason that despite the panel asking for at least the last 4 or 5 years, it's very rare indeed that the public, through this mechanism of the Police and Crime Panel, gets detailed information about positive outcomes. And even if we did, there's nothing in this report that actually defines what a positive outcome is, because we've got 22 categories of outcomes. So I'm going to be charitable and say that positive outcomes include obviously charging, out-of-court disposals, community resolution, and a few others, and you get to about 12%, maybe a weeny bit more, depending on, and that coincides with the figure that the Chief Constable gave a moment ago for positive outcomes, assuming that he's working to the same definition as I am. But as I say, there isn't as such something in that table on 4.4 on the paper, which if you can read, apparently it's so tiny it's almost impossible to read. But there's 43% on that list where no suspect or person was identified, and a big chunk of where the evidence was presumably too weak for one reason or another, which I accept could include the fact that witnesses were unwilling to give evidence in proceedings. So I go back to this at 12%, 1 in 8. Approximately of these 300,000 crimes produce a positive outcome. And I also take issue with the Chief Constable about whether or not public of West Yorkshire are only interested in relative performance. I don't accept that at all. I think they're interested in absolute performance for what they get for their money, for the taxpayers' money. And whilst other forces may struggle in the same way, I'm not sure that necessarily means that everybody's going to be happy if West Yorkshire is actually doing less bad than other forces, because that's one way of putting it. So my question is really more about, we are where we are. I would ask yet again that this sort of information may be clustered into positive outcomes, evidence issues, and perhaps into 3 or 4, is regularly made available in the various documents coming out of your office, because it isn't up to now, and I have been at this for years, and I raised it at the last meeting, and we struggle to get it. We get references in documents to outcomes improving, but it's only the data. We need data and evidence in order to justify some of these submissions, and we've got some today. We may be doing as well as other forces, and I'm sure that's not an argument for standing still. But it is of interest to the public, and I would urge you again to grasp that nettle and make this sort of information available in easily digestible and understandable forms.
Yeah, thanks, Roger, for those comments, and I know you have made those points and requested, so I take that. But before perhaps bringing the Chief Constable back in, the report obviously does go into a lot of detail, and it is difficult to sort of weave your way through it, I guess, from a public perspective. So I think you're right, there's definitely more work to do there around how we sort of explain this in a more understandable way, because there are so many categories and outcome codings within all this, which clearly are not of our making. That a national framework, and as you know, we have taken very seriously the data recording standards, and we're currently rated as outstanding for that. But there are a number of variables within here that we often have to unpick and try to explain in a rational way. But I agree with you that from a public perspective, are the public going to be happy with a 1 in 10 or just slightly above that outcome? Well, no, they're not. And I think if anybody says otherwise, I don't think that will be right. But having said that, the context behind all that is really important to understand, because we know why that is the case in many instances, and it's really just understanding some of that. But I'll perhaps bring the Chief back in, or the Deputy, just to touch on some of the points you made there, Roger.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I will just turn my camera on for a moment if colleagues will forgive me. We are slightly caught, unfortunately, within policing in having access to data and not always being able to make it available to you, not for any reason that is inappropriate, but because some of the national comparison data is provisional. It's provisional until it's published through the Office of National Statistics. So I can, with great confidence, tell you that when I look at the actual, and Roger talked about real terms, numerical basis, if I look at the charges that West Yorkshire Police do per 1,000 population, as one example, so the amount of people we charge per 1,000 population, we are significantly higher than most others in the country. We're up at 7th out of 43 forces. We're way above. We charge more people than Manchester Police charge. We charge more people than West Midlands Police charge. But I can't publish that data because it's not my data, it's provisional data. So the data lag is so great that it's only when it comes out through Office of National Statistics. But you're perfectly right that we need to work harder as a police force and collectively across the area to try and get these messages across. And you're perfectly right that 1 in 8 still doesn't present a positive picture. But what I was trying to get away from was percentages, for the very reasons that I've said before. If you record a lot of crime correctly, your percentages are held against you, which is why I'm moving more into numerical, physical. How many people do we take an outcome of against people in a positive way, which is what I think the public want. And I am pleased to report, and confident reporting, it's more than other metropolitan areas. But it's our communication battle to overcome. And it's for us to find a way of getting the data to the Commissioner so that he can give it to the panel. And I do agree that it's hard to pull out and see in some of the information we've been able to provide to date. But I think we'll take it away again to look at how we can do it. Because I think there is a very positive story to tell. And it's not just against ourselves, it's against the position up and down the country. That's all, Mark, I think.
Okay, thank you, Chief Constable. Okay, are we okay with that response, Roger?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from colleagues? Questions? Okay. Just a minor issue on the charts, Mark. They're a bit too small and hard to read and need a bit more clarity in future, so reader can read and explain. There's one or two small charts which are a bit difficult to read. So just a comment on that.
Yeah, no, I understand that, Chair. So yeah, it's one of the vagaries of the digital platform we're in at the moment. But yes, we'll look at that and try and make sure that we've got a clearer and more readable data on the tables and the diagrams.
Okay, any comments, questions from colleagues before I move on to next item? Right, silence means we move on to item 7, which is officer recruitment update, and the report is attached. I gather everybody has read it. Councillor Gruen, did you want to make a comment on this?
Chair, thank you very much. It was just an observation that obviously there has been quite a lot of recruitment, and I wonder if the Commissioner is satisfied with the rate of recruitment, or whether he thinks more could still be done to accelerate. And in particular, I wonder, in terms of the PCSOs, if this period of uncertainty has now been completed and we are able to get back on track with more PCSO recruitment.
Peter, thank you for that, those observations. So in terms of the overall rate of recruitment based on the preset commitments, yes, I am happy with that, because we're actually over, and as you know, we had a debate previously around trying to get ahead of the game, which is referenced in this report, and we have done that. But that you know, obviously that's around police officer numbers, and that's a combination of the precepts commitments and what is termed the police uplift programme monies, and the trajectory of the numbers are set out within the report, you know, over that 3-year period. So overall, yes, I'm still not happy with the level of BAME representation, I have to say, and the report talks about the various structures and things that have been put in place, but and you know, I will bring in the chief again on this one. We are working nationally with other forces and with the College of Policing to look at the whole process by you know, which the success rate or otherwise of those applicants are coming through, and there are some vagaries, to say the least, but it's welcome that we've got more of a lifetime focus on this. But again, I will need to talk to the chief regarding what more we need to do to improve that aspect of it. And then in relation to the PCSO situation, I mean, sadly, the police uplift programme, of course, funding doesn't cover PCSOs, and we've got some real pressures. So, as you know, I've been hugely committed to securing PCSOs at very high numbers within West Yorkshire for a number of years, and indeed we had a number of match funding arrangements across all 5 local authorities, but those have pretty much gone by the wayside, other than Leeds. And you will know as well as me, I think even that's under pressure as well, as part of the impact of COVID on council budgets. So we've got to really, you know, we can't wait for that to happen. We've got to look ahead, and we are managing some of those vacancies at the moment. And of course, the fact that a number of PCSOs are successful in applying to become police officers as well does impact on that. But I'll perhaps bring the chief back in at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I mean, the original question, I think, was we're committed to 311 additional police officers in this year. We're on track to recruit 393 during that period, because we got ahead of the game, as the report says, and brought some in earlier in it. The PCSO numbers are correct in the sense that because of the financial situation, we had to request and agree with the Commissioner that during the course of this year we would reduce the numbers in order to meet the budget requirements, and we've had to do that. The irony is we haven't actually reduced them as much as we intended, which is good in terms of operational policing, but bad financially. So again, that's going to have to be reviewed as we go into the next financial year about PCSO numbers. So my point being is they're under-recruited deliberately in order to save money to meet the budget. And again, in relation to BAME officer recruitment, again, nationally, it's not going in the direction that any public sector or police service would want to see. We are doing as much as we can within the national policing environment. We keep getting pointed towards other forces, and when we go through the statistics, we've actually percentage-wise recruited more through the processes than some of those. So it's dependent on how you look through things. So in the last few years, we've gone from 241 frontline BAME police officers to 347. Quickly, that's about 44% change in the frontline police officer numbers. And similarly, as an organisation, we've gone, from the low 500s to the mid 600s. Again, a significant change in the actual officers on the street. But yes, as with everybody in many public sectors, there's more to be done, and now more so than ever before. But as I've said many times before, we have to do everything within accordance with the Equalities Act and recruitment legislation, and we are pushing things as far as we possibly can within the legal limits.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chief Constable. Mark, apologies, I didn't give you an opportunity to do an overview of the report. Is there anything you want to add further? Because I opened questions before. I'll give you the opportunity to do a bit of presentation.
Thanks, Chair. No, I mean, hopefully in that answer to Councillor Grewin, I've touched on a few things there, because, the report is fairly straightforward in terms of the numbers. The Chief Constable has said there that we're actually we're over-recruited, as you know, so we took that decision early on to get more numbers through the previous training programme, which was a 14-week one, as opposed to now we've got a 2-year entry, 3-year entry point, which again is a national qualification programme. But we know there'll still be a sort of period where, if you want to refer to it as a fallow period, where you've got that gap of the time at which these officers are in training, which has got more of an academic aspect to it as well, because of the partnership we've formed with Leeds Trinity University, which is, it's good and it's fantastic opportunities for people joining through those routes. But I guess I just wanted to touch on that the BAME one, because we've debated it many times, haven't we, at the panel? But given the recruitment profile over the next 2 or 3 years, it is the time to really try and make that step change that we've all been looking for. But it's not easy. But I've been engaging actually with a number of groups in a virtual way, but having some really encouraging conversations with them around what ideas that they've got around improving pathways and perceptions of policing in some of our more diverse areas. And I think we've all got a role to play with that, and I'll be feeding that into my ongoing conversations with the Chief and West Yorkshire Police.
Thank you, Mark. Apologies, it must have been Wakefield Town Hall bell hearing in Leeds. Put me off and missed your presentation.
Yeah,
however,
no
you for this, yeah, just wanted to make a comment before I give opportunity to councillors. I mean, it's just an unfortunate situation that this recruitment of representation of public, reflecting the public in police force, well, the austerity kicked in. I know you put in all the efforts in to make a difference, but the success rate of applicants, although it's in line with the national trend, but I think there's more scope to be, more work to be done to make sure and encourage that we reflect the community we represent. So the ideal situation is, like Chief said last time, that legislation, but that's not going to happen from top. So we can do whatever we can within our powers to make sure that we reflect the communities we represent. That's just a comment from me.
Well, Chair, no, I agree with you, and I mean the Chief knows that as well. And to be fair, you know, I know he is personally committed to that as I am. But of course, it's about, you know, what are the practical things that we can put in place to improve that. And we had a really good presentation actually from the College of Policing at a regional collaboration board last time, where we really did go into that level of detail around the current diversity rates in West Yorkshire as opposed to some other areas. And I know John took away, you know, some work from that conversation in looking in more detail. Plus also at the national level, the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners and the National Police Chiefs Council have set up working groups on these very issues, and we absolutely need to link in with those to try and you know, cascade anything at a local level. So, you know, it's a lifetime situation that I think we can try to affect change as we go through.
Thank you, Commissioner. I've got Sophie next on the list, and then it'll be Tariq, and then Roger if there's anything left over, and then Masood. So, Sophie, Councillor Sophie Whitaker, did you want to ask a question, or do you think you've got your answers?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Morning, Mark. Just on this same topic of positive action, can I just draw your attention to page 6 of the last paragraph before section 7 begins? It's on there, yeah, page 6. I just wanted to ask exactly what is meant by the last sentence in that that relates to the Chief Constable challenging the College of Policing with regard to the suitability of Launchpad in relation to the force's ambitions for improving BAME representation. Can you just clarify what the inference of this is?
Yes, well, thanks, Sophie, for that question, and I'll let John answer himself, given he's quoted on that paragraph.
Yeah, so during our last recruitment campaign, I was adamant that we would remove all potential barriers from the process. So all of the BAME applicants to West Yorkshire Police who had met the minimum requirements in law for joining the police were put forward to the National College of Policing's assessment process in accordance with the police regulations. I can't employ somebody unless they go through the police regulations, Home Office approved College of Policing Assessment Centre, and at the moment that's called Launchpad. So as we put forward our candidates, the good news is the percentage of candidates who passed from West Yorkshire from a BAME background was greater than most other forces. The bad news is, in numerical terms, there was significant disproportionality in the National Policing Assessment Centre for BAME candidates, both graduates and non-graduates. So I haven't got the statistics in front of me, but there was a significant difference between graduates from a BAME background who had applied who were successful compared to white graduates. So my point being, it's out of my control, irrespective of all of the work we've done locally. So of course we'll keep doing the positive action and the support, and every one of those candidates had all of the positive action we could give them in terms of coaching, mentoring, welfare, explanation, exposure to policing, mentors, and operational staff helping them. But they've got to get through that process. I've asked the College of Policing to do some academic research around that, or whether is disproportionality associated with discrimination, or is it in relation to the candidate base? Is the differentials between the people who are applying? So the point of the sentence was there was no influence, for want of a better word, from West Yorkshire Police into the national system, but that's the national system at this moment in time. So we're still working with them to see how it can be improved, see what the barriers are, and see what changes there need to be. Because you'll sense the frustration in my voice. There's many good candidates I would love to have seen working on the streets of West Yorkshire, and I don't understand why they're not getting through the process. And the only possible explanation, if it's not unintentional bias, is that the nature of the candidate is different. Does that make sense, Councillor?
Yeah. Okay, so
it does, John. Thanks for clarifying that. I was concerned that the inference was that we potentially look at lowering the threshold for this particular group over and above every other group. But I'm glad that you've cleared it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whittaker. I've got Councillor Tariq Hussain on same. Is that right, Tariq? Did you want to come in?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I think mine was, Mark, a bit more of a statement rather than a question. And some of it's been quite well covered in the previous what Councillor Whittaker asked and stuff like that. We recruited a number of officers over the last 2 or 3 years. And I was hoping we would now be in a position where we've got some experienced officers in there who are out on the field doing their duties. My own experience particularly from my ward and from Bradford, it boils back down to, again, although with COVID, a lot of the crimes have reduced, but the antisocial behaviour has increased. So if we've got other crimes that have reduced, how come we're not deploying resources to tackle antisocial behaviour? Or why is it increasing? Maybe you have some concerns or comments about it. So that was my question, really, that over the last 2 or 3 years we have increased our workforce. The precept's gone up to actually tackle and deploy new officers. So if you could just give us a comment on those. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, of course, and John knows this, that we try and deploy as many of those into the neighbourhood policing teams, frontline roles, so we have got that extra visibility within our communities. So that's been ongoing, and those officers we over recruited that I mentioned earlier, around getting ahead of the sort of the 2 and 3 year entry point training regimes, those officers are deployed out at districts pretty much, as far as I'm aware. In terms of antisocial behaviour, yes, we have seen increases. A lot of that has been down to COVID, because particularly at the height of the lockdown restrictions, and probably currently as well, more recently following the second announcement, police are attending more of those types of neighbour dispute and ASB type situations, and we've reported that at some of the previous meetings through the weekly sort of COVID updates, if you like, that I'm getting as well. But there's no doubt it has impacted on that reporting of ASB, but they're often related to COVID aspects. So, John, did you want to add further to that?
No, it's exactly as you said, but and the councillor's right. It's just a shame, and very sadly, during that period, that local authorities have withdrawn community workers. There's less youth workers, and there's less antisocial behaviour workers, and there's less funding going into third sector and voluntary community groups. So antisocial behaviour has always been a partnership approach, and as and when services are reduced, I fear that this is the consequences of that. So we've been able to, where we've had to reduce some of our neighbourhood policing teams, but as we've reported previously, we've reduced them but focused them and allowed them time to problem solve. But the challenge for them is there's less people to actually problem solve with, because as we all know, it is a partnership approach that will reduce some of the harm within some of our communities in the neighbourhood, housing-based, youth-based, community-based antisocial behaviour. So it's a challenge with less resources out
there. Thank you, Chief Constable. Roger, if forgive me, can I count Masood Ahmed from Dewsbury on same item? Councillor Masood.
Good afternoon. So still morning, yeah. My question is around positive action. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Masood.
I mean, I welcome the report in terms of looking at the recruitment of BAM representation, and I know Sophie's asked a pertinent question around platform launchpad, and I'm pleased that the Chief Constable answered that question. I think I've got a couple of questions. One was around this goal group, the BAM goal group that's been set up to look at the BAM representation and see what there is, and I wanted to find out if there is an equal representation on that. That's one question. My other question was around attracting quality BAM candidates, and it seems to be still a challenge, and what is the West Yorkshire Police Force doing to address that? Yeah, I take into account COVID that's occurred now since March, but prior to that, what is and will the force be doing going forward? And my other question was around something that the Chief Constable just talked about, the assessment criteria for police officers, which is undertaken nationally by the College of Police. And I understand that being a difficulty because I asked a number of people within my ward community to go forward, and 3-4 of them went forward, and all 3-4 were unsuccessful. And I got feedback from the positive action coordinator that obviously is done by the College of Police, and we don't get feedback, and we don't know what's going on. So for me, it's getting that feedback to those unsuccessful candidates and how we go about doing that, making sure people don't feel deflated and think, well, there's no point applying to the police force because they don't get back to us. So those are my questions to both Mark and the Chief Constable, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Masood. Good questions. And John, am I right in saying have we got the Deputy Chief Russ Foster on as well, as he chairs the BAME Goal Group?
Yeah, I mean, we won't curtail him because I used to chair as well, but the answer to the question is yes, there's representation on it, both from the Diversity, Equalities and Inclusion team themselves, who are very well represented in terms of BAME, and there's also the Association of Muslim Police Officers, the Black Police Association, and a number of other staff networks, as long as Federation. And so there is good representation on that group, Councillor.
Yeah, and then in terms of initiatives going forward, so I think we've already sort of touched on this, and I'm keen to, really understand in more detail some of these conversations with the College of Policing, digging down into that data through this Launchpad programme. And as you've said there, the understanding the feedback sort of process between the College of Policing elements and our own gold groups and coordinators in West Yorkshire Police, because if people have got a real interest in applying and joining the police from diverse backgrounds, they need that positive feedback to allow, because there are going to be, obviously, if they don't get through first time, that there are going to be other opportunities, and I would hope that we are seizing those opportunities around mentoring and putting things in place to assist and increase those rates wherever we can. And you know, as I said earlier, I'm meeting with and have met with a number of groups myself who are making these very points. So it's a conversation we need to continue with West Yorkshire Police, and taking on board some of the feedback that we're getting from our community groups, and obviously through yourselves as councillors, through the panel, and other ward groups as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. In fact, I had the same point raised with me by one of the applicants, that all he got was a simple email to say that his application was unsuccessful, and no other further feedback to encourage him to apply again or look out for opportunities. And he was a bit disappointed that it wasn't enough. And then often it leads to questions: what's happening in the background? You know, if we're given a level playing field.
Yeah. Well,
okay, so I'm glad that you're going to look into this.
Sorry, Chair, I don't know whether the Chief wanted to just come back on that point, but I mean, clearly these are important aspects around the feedback and what ongoing support can be offered, which, you know, we absolutely need to look at.
Yeah, that's really good feedback, and I'm grateful for that, because that's certainly not what was intended or planned, and certainly not what I understood to be occurring. So we'll take that away and look at that for that very reason. We've talked a lot in that group, and I know the Deputy's been as keen as me on it, around ensuring that we keep that journey ongoing, not just up to the assessment, but continuing it on afterwards. So that's valuable to us, because we can take it back again and look through that process again, because that's definitely what we don't want to happen. The only other side to this is it's a highly competitive process with huge numbers involved, and we're talking thousands of candidates. And so, you know, there's a process and a system in place. But I totally agree that actually we should be encouraging, supporting, and going back for the second and third time with people to help them about jobs as policing or as investigators or other jobs if necessary. So thank you.
Jack, can I come back in?
Okay, Masood.
Yeah, I mean, I welcome what the Chief Constable and Mark are saying, because the 3 applicants /4 I'm referring to just had an email, John and Mark, and I welcome this mentoring feedback and support, because all 3 of them I've spoken to, and all 3 feel deflated, thinking, well, we just had an email, we've not really had much back, and quite clearly we're not too sure what's going on, other than the email I got later on probing back, saying that it's done by the College of Police and the feedback is not here nor there. But I do welcome what the PCC Mark has just said about mentoring, supporting and revisiting those individuals and applicants. So I'm happy to work and support where I can as an elected member. Thank you both.
Yeah, no, thanks again for those comments, and I'm happy to, you know, take that up with you outside of this meeting, if that's okay.
Chair, can I come in?
Yes, Tariq.
Yeah, just on that note, Masood makes some points and stuff like that. If you recall, in the last meeting or meeting before, I raised a concern similar to that. What I like to see, if possible, to see how many applicants you're getting and what kind of feedback's going back to these people. Because it's really, really important for these guys who don't manage to get in, but to get this feedback to see where they can improve.
Yeah.
If we're really serious about employing people from the Barmy community, these are the things that are going to help to recruit in the future.
Yeah.
So is there any chance of bringing anything back to the panel at all in the future? Thank you.
Well, yes to that, but what we will need to do in between, I guess, is just really, you know, get some of the details of those cases, and you know, I think this is what is starting to happen through this lifetime assessment, if you like, around some of these processes, and that's what needs to happen, where I don't think we've had that opportunity before because of the levels of recruitment that are going to be underway. So absolutely, I think these are the conversations we need to carry on having to try and affect that change, you know, through the frameworks we've got in place.
Thank you, Commissioner. I've got Roger on list. Roger, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, please. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Right, thank you, Mark. Mark, I've got 3 questions, if I may. Whilst I think it's absolutely right and proper that we focus quite a lot of our business on BAME, I think we also should focus on disability as another protected characteristic, particularly as this week marks the 25th anniversary of the Disability Discrimination Act. And a recent report shows that people with disabilities suffer significant barriers to employment, often worse than those who are BAME. Now, surprisingly to me, you've captured data, presumably on the monitoring form, about disability from candidates. But are you able to give any information today, or if not in future, about the relative success rates of people with disabilities? And because disabilities is such a huge range of situations, something which might show the sorts of disabilities that the force has been able to accommodate, or who have been successful in the College of Policing's assessment centre. I think we'd be particularly interested in seeing how representative police forces really are of that particular group. Secondly, one reading of your paper, you talk about you managed to get people through the system into the force early, and they only have to do, I think it's 14 weeks training, and then they're deployable. And then in the next sort of sentence talk about the 48-week course at Leeds Trinity. I may be misreading this, but is there any hint in there that you think that the new regime is too long and unnecessary? And then thirdly, you will have noted that it's been announced recently that the recruitment age for police officers has dropped to 17, or will do shortly. Do you see that having any material impact on the force's ability to recruit?
Thank you, Roger.
Okay, thanks, Roger. Yeah, good questions. Yeah, we should be able to get the numbers on the disability figures and the various strands. So we've definitely seen those. So I haven't got them to hand, but unless Chief Constable tells me otherwise. But I think we are, we try to be an inclusive employer and absolutely encourage applications from various disability groups. In terms of the new regime versus the old regime, well, I think the jury's still out on that. We're still in the early days of the new degree entry 2-year, and then the apprentice one over 3 years. I can see both sides of the argument there. There was a lot of debate and consultation before those things were agreed at the national level, and views were expressed around concerns of attracting certain people from certain backgrounds or deprived communities, and I guess the proof will be in the pudding with that. But I'd be interested to hear what the Chief's got to say on the early sort of signs of that. And then on the recruitment age, potentially it might, but I don't think it'll have a huge impact personally. But the fact that we've got a cadet scheme in place in West Yorkshire is a good thing, and that might lead to some additional sort of people at that age sort of coming forward in West Yorkshire. But I don't know whether the Chief wanted to just add any comments as well.
Yeah, if I may, the 11.9% of our police staff have a visible or non-visible disability, and it's 6% of officers as well. We work closely with the Disabled Police Association and a number of different charities, and of course there's a vast array of different charities. I think in the report there was some data around applicants with disabilities. So there is work ongoing in terms around positive action and positive support for candidates going through. In terms of the age of applicants, just for clarity, the 17 is in order to apply, and that's in order to allow us to get, previously the regulations weren't, you couldn't actually apply to policing. until it was 17.5 or 18. And of course, that puts a problem in terms of UCAS applications and people who are looking at university or a policing degree. So it's 17 to allow them to apply, and then the age for joining still remains the same. And I forget the third point, forgive me.
It was the new regime.
Yeah. Again, it's just it is laid in regulations that's how we have to recruit now, as we've discussed before, either pre-entry degrees, obtain a degree, or an apprenticeship program. We are wishing to maximise and get the most we possibly can out of that program, and you'll have to ask me in a couple of years as to what our judgment on it is. But if we're going to do it, we're going to do it as best as we possibly can with West Yorkshire and get the best possible police officers out onto the streets of West Yorkshire. But the transition has been worked through in terms of making sure that we've still got the right amount of officers on the streets, and we're confident that will happen. So, if I may, I'll make no comment on the difference between the two schemes until we see the results of it.
Thank you, Constable. Roger's raised a very important question. It was recently in news that the disabled people have had more effect during COVID and more disadvantage, and the gap has extended with their opportunities because there's been no funding, no grants, no support for disabled people. So it's had a bigger impact on them. So thank you, Roger, for raising that. Anybody else wants to speak on this item before we move on? Okay, silence. We move on. That takes us to item 8, devolution implications for the PCC. There was a briefing book sent after the panel papers. I assume everybody's read that. Commissioner, did you want to give an overview, or was that just to... Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, obviously, as council members, you will be somewhat aware of the conversations that have been going on in the local authorities and the consultation that took place during the summer, and the feedback then that had to be sent into the government regarding the legislation that needs to be passed. And I understand all that is pretty much in place, and I think they're just trying to find some ministerial time to sort of ratify that and put it through. So the first page of the report just gives that background, really. And again, originally the PCC aspects of this were going to transfer in 2024. As we know, PCC elections, local elections, were cancelled this year in May 2020, which brought the opportunity forward, and certainly the Combined Authority and the Home Office were keen to see that brought forward. And I won't go through them all, but there's a number of letters and appendices that I've attached that demonstrate the correspondence and the views that I made known during that process. The huge dynamic here, of course, is West Yorkshire is the only new devolution mayoral deal that will happen in May, albeit, as I do touch on in the report, I suspect there'll be quite a few other areas that come forward after the elections next year around devolution deals. And the government's preferred model, of course, is that you've got to elect a mayor to do that. So that's the sort of context to it there in terms of the broader picture. Obviously we looked at the Greater Manchester arrangements that are in place, and that's the government's preferred way forward around doing a very similar transition based on that. But all transitions are different. I mean, the office over in Greater Manchester at the time, my colleague over there, Tony Lloyd, who was the PCC, they inherited a sort of back office that was already embedded within Salford Council. So that you know, we haven't got that here. We're more of a standalone office under a corporation sole model. And when I've looked at that, the corporation sole model was the one that was originally established in London when the mayor was set up there. And having looked at both, I literally am somewhere in the middle around, which is, I can see benefits to both, but you know, I personally think the corporation sole one will be favoured by PCC colleagues who will sort of put into a further consultation as we move forward. But as far as West Yorkshire is concerned, it's very clear that it is the mayoral combined authority route that will be in place. So, you know, the report just sets out some of the work around feasibility assessments that have been carried out, and again, some of that referred to in the appendices. As I've said, the conversations we've had with the combined authority, the Home Office, the letters, the feedback, the consultation. What also makes our transition more complicated is the fact that we do host the National Police Air Service, and despite raising this with the Home Office, I put an alternative forward around a 2-year transition because of that, but they weren't minded or interested really in looking at that. And as it stands, the only option in the short term is for the host body, which will be the mayoral combined authority, to take on the ownership of the assets, and that means, you know, all the bases and the helicopters throughout Wales. But it's a very complicated picture, and I won't go into it all now, but there's a lot going on in that space that, as John knows, and it takes up an awful lot of our time. But it's an important national service, and there's some key decisions around fleet replacement that are in with the Home Office at the moment, and we'll see how all that goes. But there's a lot of work to do. So in terms of the next steps, which is point 5, transition working groups have been established with the combined authority, ourselves, the Home Office and the APCC. There's a number of other work streams that are now being formulated and underway. Decision points prior to transfer, as I've said, that the parliamentary order is about to be finalised or go through the process, as I understand it, following the council's approval around the draft orders. And of course, assuming COVID isn't as it is now, elections will take place in May of next year. But you know, we've tried to make sure staff have been communicated with, and we've had some joint sessions with the combined authority for the benefit of staff, just for them to explain some of the wider responsibilities and services. And in conclusion, there are, you know, it's a really difficult process because it doesn't look as though we're going to get any extra resources, despite the ask to the Home Office. They're saying it should be all covered in the combined authority as part of the devolution deal, and I think that pretty much sums it up at the moment, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can I open up for questions to the floor, please, if anybody wants to ask questions? No, we didn't get any chance to have a chat on this item earlier in the private session, but feel free to speak or put a comment in the box to say you want to speak, in case everybody wants to speak.
I do, Chair, if I may.
Yeah, Councillor Gruen.
Well, Mark, thank you very much for a very professional and business-like conversation there. And I recognise, as the panel does, that you and your office are put in a very difficult situation. However, in terms of the panel, what I think our role is to ensure that day-to-day work continues, priorities you have set out and we've agreed continue, and that oversight, and I mean this in roles rather than personalities, oversight of the Chief Constable and the force also continues, whilst at the same time you're being asked to do, as you say, over and above a tremendous amount of transitional work. So I think we want some reassurance, if you can give us that you are setting up to do that day-to-day business as normal work. And perhaps you can give us an insight as to how you think the budgetary process might work, because we are soon going to start on that. So in those terms, with no elected mayor until after May, do I assume that you will be the lead person in setting the precept for next year? So I recognise the difficulties and the tensions, but you'll understand why I'm asking the questions.
Yeah, of course. And
thank you, Councillor.
Sorry, yes, thanks, Councillor Gruen. I mean, absolutely. Yes, we know that we have to continue in terms of the oversight of the Chief and West Yorkshire Police, and that absolutely will still continue. But I think, you know, it would be remiss of me not to point out the real pressures that we face here, because of course all this should have happened in 2024, not next year, but because of the exceptional circumstances this year around the cancellation of the elections and the fact that West Yorkshire is the only devolution deal that's new one that's coming into being next year, that's the reason why the position we're in. As you will see in one of the letters, we did make a request to the Home Office around some additional resources, around about £500,000. That doesn't look as though it's forthcoming, which clearly adds other pressures. But, you know, we are working very hard within the office, but also with West Yorkshire Police as well, and the Combined Authority, to ensure we've got the right structures in place. Now, Catherine Johnson is on the line, who's the Treasurer and has been leading a lot of this work from the office. Catherine, would you like to come in and make some comments at this point?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Morning, everybody. Yeah, just to pick up on 2 points, really. Councillor Gruen's question around the continuity of arrangements during this transition period. We have 2 risks on our corporate risk register, specifically around devolution. The first one being continuity of arrangements for oversight and scrutiny. So we track that one, we've got measures in place. And the second one is around an efficient and effective transfer. And obviously a lot of the stuff that's mentioned within that report is captured as part of that, the risk and the actions that we're taking to address that risk. So both of them are very, very heavily tracked. We're making sure we put appropriate resources where we can. Now, we will continue to make the case for the additional resources, both from WICA and from the Home Office, because it's a phenomenal amount of work to undertake and heavily complex. And just by way of example here, 2/5 of my working week have been spent on devolution since May, so it's a huge amount of time to suddenly give up from the Treasurer portfolio. And we recognise that there's loads of pressure on our West Yorkshire Police colleagues as well, certainly from all the IT system migration, etc. It's a huge amount of resource that's going to be required, hence the bid with the Combined Authority for the additional monies from the Home Office. But in terms of the budget process, yep, that should run this year the same way as it has done in previous years.
Yeah, sorry, I just to confirm that then, Peter, that the budget setting in February, I think it is next year, will be done by the PCC, myself, and you know, that doesn't change in terms of the period up until the mayor election. But you know, clearly, you know, as we've set out, there's a lot to do during that period as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, lot of challenges and a lot of work to be done up to the mayoral elections in May. Thank you for that contribution and update, Commissioner, and thank you for the good question, Councillor Gruen. Does anybody else want to ask any question, clarification on devolution?
Yes, please.
Yes, Roger.
2 points. I don't know whether anybody will be able to answer them. Does anybody think that the mayor would be able to issue a revised budget and therefore a revised precept, even though the precepts will have been issued by the 5 authorities, obviously in March? And secondly, Mark, I know that we were sent a document, a 30-page document written by the Combined Authority, which explains devolution. I don't know whether you're familiar with this document. But on, I think it's page 27, it makes a statement that it talks about the police and crime panel beyond devolution. It makes a statement that the panel will not have the power of vetoing the precept, whereas obviously it does at the moment. Does anybody know whether that's a change in the law or an error in the document?
Yeah, good questions, Roger. So there will be still a distinct police precept under the mayoral model. I'm not entirely certain, Catherine, whether a mayor coming in can then vary that without special powers or that they can't do it under the legislation. I don't know whether you're aware of that.
Yeah, I can answer both points. Yeah, so we are aware that question has been asked to the Combined Authority, and they've specifically asked the Home Office and MHCLG to come back on whether or not that is the case. I don't believe there's anything in existing legislation that allows that to happen. So unless they include it within the draft order, which certainly was not apparent to me on reading it, albeit we have asked further questions on that, I think it's very unlikely. And on the second point
about the panel,
yeah, in this document that the panel will not have a right to veto of a precept.
I think that's an error, Roger. I've not seen the document you're referring to, but that's certainly not my understanding of it, and we have discussed it in some detail, and certainly as it operates in Greater Manchester is very similar to how we currently operate now.
Well, maybe I should ask if you get hold of that document, which I'm sure Sam will send you. It's authored by the Combined Authority, and you can then point out this particular line to them.
Yes, I will do. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. And just on that, I think we've had a letter on this week from the policing minister because the government had undertaken a 2-stage review of the role of PCCs, and indeed that covers the mayors as well, and the deputy mayors for policing within that. And they're going to be making some announcements imminently, we're told, around some additionalities for PCCs that will come into being after the 21 elections. But then I think there'll be a further review after 21 as well. And it could cover areas around criminal justice, for example, which I would welcome, I have to say, personally, and more controversially probably around the fire and rescue governance side of things. But as I understand it, the role of panels will remain pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner, and that is my understanding as well after having casual conversations with the leaders. They were saying that it'll be very similar to Manchester model, which means the role of panel will stay as it is. So thank you for that. Does anybody else want to ask any questions or make a comment on this devolution deal and its implications? Okay, silence means we're done. Nothing in comment box, no. So that takes us to item 9, which is published key decisions. Just to note.
Yes, on information, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. And then next item, which is agreed action logs.
I don't know whether Sam wanted to comment.
There's nothing significant outstanding. There's a couple of items which I can discuss with Kelly about when we can get them timetabled in for coming back to panel.
Okay, thank you, Sam. So nothing else to raise on the agreed action log?
Not from me, Chair, no.
Thank you. Panel, are we okay? Yeah. So that brings us on to forward agenda plan. So we've put some provision. Well, these are the dates for this year here. So next meeting's on 11th of December. And in the briefing note, we've put some dates agreed for next year.
Yeah, it's perhaps just worth mentioning under this about meetings for next year. We'll hopefully can get those circulated following discussion with the Commissioner.
Yeah, so we've got the date set for January, which is 22nd of February, and the precept meeting will be 5th of February, and then we have a date on 19th of March. And after that, we didn't know what to do with the April. These are provisional conversations with the Commissioner at the one-to-one meeting I had on Tuesday. I was mindful that there's going to be if we don't hold an April meeting, often panel members are obviously busy with elections. We don't know whether it's going to be postal votes or whatever. However, from 19th of March until next meeting is 18th of June, there was a big gap, and I thought we need just a brush-up meeting at least. How do panel members feel about that? Because we've got the Easter week, school holidays, and the only suitable date, which is very close to elections, is 23rd of April.
I think it's a good idea, Chair.
Possible joint session with PCC and West Yorkshire Combined Authority, because then obviously after elections the local authorities will hold their AGMs, and then our AGM is on 18th. So are members okay with 23rd of April?
Yeah.
I think so, Chair.
Okay, because I didn't want to agree this because of election period. I thought I'll bring it up to the panel and get everybody's consensus.
Chair, if I could just come in, as you know, we discussed it, didn't we, at the chair?
We did.
And I think I agree that there needs to be something in between that period, but it's just to bear in mind what we were saying earlier around the transition period, and you know, whether it's a joint session with the combined authority or some kind of mop-up conversation might be helpful.
Yes.
Because, you know, clearly we'd be very close to the May election then. And obviously, given that it'll be PERDA, we just need to be mindful of that it's really a conversation around more around the processes and the position statement, and hopefully facilitating a smooth transition.
Yeah, that's I think the majority are in favour of the meeting in April. Just a brief session, so bearing in mind it will be PERDA, because the meeting before is just before the PERDA kicks in. So we'll agree that provisionally, and Sam and Kelly will fix these dates. And then we have the June meeting and a private session induction meeting on 25th of June, 16th. You've seen it all in paper. So are we all in agreement with that?
Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. And that takes us to next item 12, complaints received by the panel. So you've got a sheet there, and I'm sure everybody's read that. I think it's going to be first time we're going to finish on time, which is good.
Can I ask, Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Roger.
Where's the item about current items of interest to the Commissioner, and which we always have on the agenda?
I apologise, Roger. I've just realised that myself, that it's not on this agenda. So whether or not we can use the opportunity to any other business
Yes, we will. We will use the opportunity. Thank you, Roger. Well spotted. Okay, so item 12 complaints. Just to read, the note paper is attached, and then that takes us to any other business. Now, does anybody want to bring this item forward? Any comments on commissioners?
Would you like me to just comment?
Yes, please.
That'd be helpful.
Okay, Commissioner.
Okay. Thank you. Well, firstly, I just wanted to say that this morning, obviously, we've had the news of Peter Sutcliffe, Yorkshire Ripper, passing away, and I think it's right that we just acknowledge our thoughts are with families and victims of those pretty horrendous crimes that are so well publicised. So I just wanted to say that on today. In terms of other ongoing issues, I mean, I did touch on it during the meeting, but and you're probably all aware that the government have announced that it won't be a 3-year spending settlement. It's going to be a 12 months one, probably understandably given everything that's been going on around COVID and all the announcements around furlough and funding amounts that have been agreed for various departments. But clearly we were planning for a 3-year settlement, so it's disappointing in that sense, but as I've said, understandable. So we're having that through the APCC, and I know Chief Constable will be through the NPCC, conversations to try and make sure that policing isn't somehow dropped down as a priority and that it gets the funding it requires. I do worry, I have to say though, around some of the noises I'm hearing in the margins around pressures now, and certainly, you know, we've been undertaking a number of budget conversations in West Yorkshire, and we've got some real challenges, particularly around the police staff side of things. So I didn't want that to come as a shock, I guess, at the next as we move forward around the budget conversations. But you know, there's a lot of work ongoing internally to identify where savings can be made, and the precept setting obviously is an important element of that in mitigating or otherwise what some of that might look like. But I guess until we get the details of the settlement, it's we're still a little bit in the dark, but you know, it's a real focus for us, I think, at the moment around the budgetary situation. Obviously last weekend as well, some of you will have seen the incidents that happened in the Halton Moor area, and I had a full briefing with the chief on Monday just to catch up on that, and obviously condemn the actions of a minority there. But the police did move swiftly with Leeds Council, and I think charges have been brought, so I won't say any more on that, but obviously that was a concern. But again, you know, the police did act swiftly, so you know, there's some challenges out there, as we know, in terms of some of the activities and unacceptable behaviour that the police are dealing with. And on general COVID enforcement, you know, I'm sort of assured really that the police are still using the 4E's approach around encourage, explain, engage, and yes, enforce where they need to. I still think that is the right approach, because you know, communities have got a lot to contend with at the moment around the restrictions, and I'm sure all of us will have been affected in some way personally, not only through work but with our families and personal situations. So it's something that through my office we've really tried to work with some of our partners on the commission services around victims, around domestic abuse, charities, etc. And I think we have just been allocated some additional funding distribute to some of those groups, which we will do. But again, the Home Office just expect you to turn things around on the flick of a coin, and we know it takes a bit more work than that. So that's a quick overview from me, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, while you're on this topic, I just wanted to bring to the panel's attention, and yours and Chief Constable's, that at our Safer Leeds meeting on Monday, this issue of bonfire night was brought up and discussed, and a Leeds police force received about 9 calls on that, which were all dealt with, or most of them, I think. However, there was some serious concern about emergency services, especially like the fire service, the police service, who are there for the protection of police, were attacked and are attacked. They were attacked last year and even this year, including buses. There's a group throwing bricks at buses, and also taxi drivers, which has been going on for a while in certain hotspots in Leeds, and this time a brick went through the windscreen of a taxi driver and injured the driver, and he was in hospital. So Leeds has decided to do some work on this, and it's a very important issue, and I want to bring to your attention and Chief Constable's attention that we cannot accept people attacking emergency service who are there to provide support and for the members of public. So it's something maybe you could work with the other local authorities, not only Leeds, but wherever this issue is, to work with those authorities and make sure that we nip it in the bud and deal with it properly and efficiently.
Yeah, no, thanks. I'm aware of some of those incidents. I did read about the brick with the taxi driver and the buses as well. And like you say, you know, we've been very strong on what was the Protectors campaign, but supporting tougher sort of measures and legislation around any emergency service workers that are attacked in that way. And I'm pleased to say that despite the difficulties with the courts, they have sort of acted on those cases that have been brought through. But I don't know whether John just wanted to quickly comment on that, because obviously it's his colleagues that are going out as ever and dealing with these things day in, day out.
Yeah, no, it's something we've seen seasonally around this time of the year over many years. It got better and better and less incidents as time has gone on, as we've approached in a partnership approach. But yes, like all members of the panel, it beggars belief that people wish to assault emergency services workers and the transport infrastructure, whether that be taxis or buses, when they're trying to provide services to communities. So there was proactive action ongoing, and there is investigations ongoing, and we'll work with all local authorities and licensing authorities where we can on it. And in relation to the assaults on emergency service workers, we're grateful for the national legislation now, and we're working very hard with ambulance, fire and police to ensure that it's followed through with robust investigations.
Thank you, Chief. And this taxi drivers attack, you know, is certain hotspots, and I've been asking members to make a recording, and in 1 week there were 15 attacks on taxi drivers in one firm, which is in I think Peter Greuen's ward. So it's an ongoing issue, and again it's safety of public as well, and people in transport industry like the buses and taxis. So if you could, you know, look into that. And Councillor Cooper, the executive member for communities, did mention in the Safer Leeds executive that she will work with all the agencies to really tackle with this issue in supporting emergency services. So
Chair, just without extending this issue, it would be useful if the licensing authorities would make conditions about CCTV in and outside of the taxis. That would be helpful to us, but there seems to be some resistance, but we can maybe take it offline.
Okay, thank you. I will speak with the licensing committee as well, or the chair, whom I know. So any other comments from anybody else?
Yeah, I've got a couple, if I may.
Okay, Roger, fire away.
Mark, about 3 weeks ago, I received a phone call from a Channel 4 producer. His story was that they'd done some work, I can't remember if it was by FOI or not, into the use of force by police forces, and that West Yorkshire was one of the 3 forces that allegedly used more force than any other. He misunderstood what the panel was. He wanted me to provide him some information, which I wouldn't have done anyway, but I couldn't, even if I wanted to. So that was it. I got an email from him. I have checked out that the guy was a Channel 4 producer. So my questions are, 1, are you aware of this? 2, is there anything in it? And if there is, 3, can we have a piece of paper on it at our next meeting? That's one question. My second question relates to COVID in a way. Hopefully, there will be a rollout of mass vaccinations over the next several months. And there's a growing social media anti-vax campaign, which is of worry to many people. And we've already seen the odd demonstration. Now, it's possible that because the models that will be used for vaccination include GP surgeries, which are, out on their own, and also the sports hall model, that there may be demonstrations. So I just want to make sure that the force, you and the force, are tuned into the local vaccination planning groups which each local authority has, in order to be able to provide whatever necessary support is needed for any mass vaccinations to go through smoothly.
Thank you, Roger. Okay, thanks for those. No, I'm not fully aware of the Channel 4 thing, Roger, but if you wanted to send some details through, happy to look at that. I mean, we will have those details around the use of force. In fact, I was part of a conversation with one of those groups in Kirklees, actually, around the whole sort of disproportionality. But actually, the figures didn't look out of kilter, I have to say, and West Yorkshire is always going to be up there in terms of numbers, because we're the 4th largest police force in England and Wales. But of course, what we want to see is justifiable and proportionate use of those powers, and we certainly have been looking at that through the COVID period. So I'm pretty sure with John we'll be able to provide more detail on that. But as I say, let us know what the approach was. And then on the second point, yes, we are plugged in through the local resilience forums and the sort of daily updates that I get, that the force get, and the police playing their part within all that. But like you, yes, a concern, I guess, of those groups that want to rebel or have got a different view. They're entitled to have a different view, but clearly we're talking about a public health crisis here, and the news about the vaccine this week is light at the end of the tunnel for all of us, and clearly we want that to be successful. So that will be my view of that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Roger, for bringing that up. To be honest, I've seen so many these social media clips against the vaccine, and and it's growing and growing, and a lot of people are, just because of these social media activity, are reluctant to go to hospital even if they're seriously ill, and reluctant to have the vaccine. So yes, we need to be prepared for that. So thank you, Roger. Anybody else wants to speak? Okay, Joe Sykes wants to thank panel members, complaints subcommittee members who took part on 16th of October. Can I also thank Joe and her team as well for dealing with the complaints issues? So is there anything else on this item or any other business? So we are date and time of next meeting. So that's it. We've already mentioned that. So can I thank each and every member of the panel and Commissioner's team and Sam Wilkinson's team and the legal for supporting today's panel meeting, and Greg, for the IT expert, for supporting us. So look forward to seeing you. Be safe, take care, because it was the last meeting. I was okay up till 12 o'clock, so I must have got the transmission on the air or through the internet, and 2-3 hours afterwards I was infected and aches and pains started. So please take care and be safe, and look forward to speaking with you next time.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, bye, Chair.
Bye.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Thank you very much, Mohammed.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.